News Talk 820, WBAP.
Wherever you want us.
The trade war, and you guys have heard this, the trade war that Donald Trump is starting, and that's a lie. It's a complete 100% lie. Let's talk about this with Lee Spieckerman. He's the president of Spieckerman Media, LLC, a media strategy consulting and television production firm, and advisor to Newt Gingrich in 2012, his presidential campaign. Lee has written extensively on public policy and public strategy. Lee, welcome for the first time to the Chris Salcedo Show.
Honor to be with you, Chris. Thank you.
What's your reaction?
Well, I think this entire summit that President Trump has been engaged in with NATO has been a huge success. Obviously, it hasn't been portrayed that way in many quarters. What people overlook is that the establishment, the elites, have a stranglehold on the mentality of politicians and media figures, most media figures, and that is standing in the way of policies that are best for the people. We've been engaged in a trade war for decades, and we've been losing, and President Trump is finally engaging and saying, we're not going to continue to live by the be hosed and like it paradigm, which apparently is what the rest of the world thinks that we should be putting up with.
Yeah, because we've got the money. We deserve to be treated unfairly.
We have it now. Now, but how long is it going to last?
Exactly. I want to get to NATO here in a minute, but let's stick with let's narrow in on trade. The President of the United States announced a second round of tariffs on Chinese goods, $200 billion worth. And the reason why the administration said this is happening is because China, in typical communist fashion, basically ignored our protests and saying, hey, we got to do something about this trade imbalance. China collectively gave us the middle finger. So the president said, okay, if that's how you want to play it, here comes round number two. Explain all of this in detail, if you would.
Well, the upshot is we're taking a pretty incremental approach because we import about $500 billion worth of goods from China every year. So even with the $200 billion in products that are subject to tariffs that the president just announced, it's still considerably less than the total of exports to the United States from China. But this is the direction that we have to move. Personally, I think the simplest way to approach this is to put a 15% tariff on all imported goods to the United States, which adheres to what we've had for most of our history. Again, you never hear this. The media basically laps up the establishment's free trade drivel, and they don't even bother to look at history or to look at economic reality and what we've actually done. For the first nearly 150 years of our country's existence, import tariffs were the #1 source of revenue for the federal government. And during that period, we built the mightiest economy and the highest standard of living in human history. So it's not like there's an inherent problem with tariffs. I don't know why we have all these so-called conservatives that have a problem with import tariffs, but they don't seem to have a problem with income taxes, which of course is the major source of revenue for our country now. I'd much rather add more tariffs to imports, which means more American jobs, more investment here in the United States, than raise income taxes. And unfortunately, that is the choice that we're presented with, because even with President Trump's terrific policies, even with the tax cut, even with the barn-burning economic growth we're currently experiencing thanks to the president's policies, in the coming years, we're talking about trillion-dollar deficits. And the only way the politicians are going to plug that hole is by either impossible cuts in Social Security and Medicare and or income tax increases, and believe me, they won't just be on the rich because there's not enough money there. I'd rather keep income taxes low and encourage earning and investment, and then raise import tariffs so that we're producing more products here in the United States. So President Trump is on exactly the right track with China and the EU. One quick other point on tariffs with China, Chris, is I think until this North Korea nuclear situation is resolved, we should impose a special 40% tariff on Chinese exports to the United States. And I'm not just saying that. I'm not saying that
a
to
nuclear
be clever
tax.
or to be funny. But that is a national security emergency.
I agree.
And we've got to do something.
Yeah, we got to penalize them for militarizing the South China Sea as well.
Absolutely.
Last thing. By the way, Lee Spieckerman is our guest right now, president of Spieckerman Media, LLC. The president has said his goal, the reason why he's even doing tariffs, is to get rid of all tariffs. Make it real free trade, no trade barriers anywhere. He says he brought it up at the G7. He said, hey, let's all agree right now, we'll lower all trade barriers, and they all wouldn't take him up on it. So
yeah, the silence was deafening.
Oh, I know. So that. I mean, and there's the basket of biased press. That's what I call them, the basket of biased press, saying that it's okay for other countries to screw America, but when America fights back, it's somehow untoward. I don't buy this. Do you?
Well, not at all. I mean, as I've said, the media in this country, they're not even taking time to do their own research or look at the actual numbers. We have an $800 billion goods trade deficit in this country. That is costing us, Chris, nearly 4 million well-paying jobs. We've had incomes stalled in this country for 30 years. They're finally starting to rise thanks to President Trump's policies, but we still have this millstone around our neck of massive trade deficits. And frankly, I think what President Trump has proposed, which, as you said, no countries are taking him up on at this point, of no tariffs, that's only part of the picture. There's a labyrinth of subsidies, of currency devaluations, of unfair regulations on imports that these countries impose, basically to boost their exports and to stifle American imports.
Yeah, that's a whole other show.
Untangling all of that is almost impossible. That's why I think the simple thing is just to put a tariff on. That way we don't have to figure all that out. We don't have to take years to challenge it at the WTO.
Right.
We create revenue that our country desperately needs without raising income taxes, and we create, most importantly, more well-paying American jobs. A retail job in this country pays, and a job as a waiter or a barista, that pays $11 to $14 an hour. The average manufacturing job in the U.S. pays $24 an hour. That's a $20,000 a year difference. Plus, most manufacturing jobs have full benefits.
Last thing I got to get into really quickly. The President of the United States has been accused of undermining NATO because he wants them to pay their agreed amounts to our mutual defense. But really the country that is undermining NATO, and it was brought to light this trip, is Germany, because Germany is sending over billions of dollars paying for Russian gas instead of doing a deal with allies like the United States. Is that how you see it?
Germany is entering into this atrocious gas pipeline deal with Russia, which the Trump administration has vehemently opposed for months. They've been pushing for months for Germany to cancel that project, not to do that, not to become even more reliant on Russian energy, as President Trump beautifully pointed out in that breakfast a couple of days ago. So not only do we have a nearly $70 billion goods trade deficit, but they're underspending on defense by $30-some-odd billion a year. So in effect, American taxpayers and workers are writing Germany a check for $100 billion every year. And then here they are acting like we're undermining NATO. Almost none of the NATO countries, other than the U.S., the U.K., I think Poland, Estonia, Greece, other than those, no one is paying the percentage that they are supposed to for defense. In Germany, we have a scary lack of ability to deploy military forces because of their underinvestment in defense.
That's true. Hey, Lee, we got to cut it off there, man. I appreciate the insight. Lee Spieckerman, everybody. Spieckerman. If you want to look him up on Twitter. Lee, appreciate the time and expertise, sir. Thank you very much.
Great to be with you, and great points, Chris. Thank you.